This episode was recorded on July 31st, 2024. It hasn't been an ordinary 24 hours in the Middle East. The tension and anxiety is palpable in many communities, both in Iran, Lebanon, and many places in between, as we look at what happens next after two major players and two important groups in the so-called axis of resistance were targeted, and many countries pointing the blame at Israel. Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated on Wednesday. He was in Tehran attending the inauguration of Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. This was hours after Israel claimed it killed the second-in-command of Hezbollah, Fouad Shukr, during an attack on a very crowded area in Beirut. Hezbollah has not confirmed his death. At the time of recording this, 74 people have been injured, and 2 women and 2 children were killed in that attack. It comes just days after a rocket hit a football field in Majdal Shams in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, killing 12 children. Israel and Hezbollah blamed each other. Meanwhile, Iran's leadership has already condemned the killing of Haniyeh, vowing that Israel will face punishment. Israel has not yet commented on or claimed the attack. This is Beyond the Headlines, and I'm your host, Nada AlTaher. This week, we unpack how these recent escalations in Beirut and Tehran will play out, and whether this means that ceasefire talks have reached a dead end. I'm joined now by MENA Program Director at Crisis Group Joost Hiltermann and Palestine analyst Taghreed El-Khodary to better understand the major events of this past week and the impact they will have in Lebanon, Iran, Gaza, and the region as a whole. Taghreed, can you give us an overview of who Ismail Haniyeh was within Hamas, but also within Palestine and the wider region? What role did he play?
I covered Gaza during the second Intifada, during the Israeli unilateral withdrawal, and also first war on Hamas in 2008, 2009. I met with Haniyeh many times. So for me, I had coffee with him. He's really very pragmatic. He listens. He respects different opinion. I am in Cairo now. I meet with many Palestinians who were pushed to leave Gaza due to the genocide that is taking place. And Haniyeh met with them, with many Palestinians here when he visited Cairo last time. And there are many people who were very angry at Hamas. And he wasn't angry when he listened to their frustration. He's the person who listens, who respected, who understood their frustration. It's very important to realize that there are many who support Hamas, that there are many who is among the silent majority who really believe that Haniyeh has nothing to do with October 7. And now Israel has decided to go that far to kill such pragmatic in the eyes of many people. He is the one who can meet with any political leader in the region, including in the MENA region, including Turkey. He's the political face, he's the diplomatic face for Hamas, but definitely when it comes to the ceasefire that Palestinians, especially in Gaza, are extremely desperate for. So now, with Israel's assassination attack, it's very obvious, it's so clear that Netanyahu is more clear than the day before that I'm not interested in the ceasefire at all for now. I attended many speeches by Haniyeh when I was in Gaza, and I followed, and I remember that statement. Some of us are soldiers, some of us in Hamas, that's what, and I quote him, some of us are soldiers, some are leaders, some are lovers of martyrdom. And that is his famous quote. So it's not a surprise for Hamas. It was very shocking for many Palestinians, among them the silent majority. I called people in Gaza like an hour before, what do you think? And many of them, he's like us. We are martyrs too. So again, what Israel is doing, it's really empowering Hamas. It makes Hamas to be same as the people, as the victims who are suffering in Gaza right now.
Joost, by the time of recording this, Israel had not yet commented on his killing, although many are pointing towards Israel and that this was an Israeli operation. All of this, of course, comes at the heels of an Israeli strike on South Beirut. despite warnings worldwide to contain the fighting and to de-escalate the situation. We've been constantly talking about fears of the war in Gaza spilling over, but hasn't this already happened? And what is Israel's endgame here? What's the strategy that they're employing?
The Gaza war spilled over a long time ago. It spilled over right after October 7th, once Israel launched its attack on Gaza, and Hamas's allies in the region responded in their own ways, in their own various ways, by attacking Israeli interests, US bases, whatever. But everything has strangely and maybe luckily been contained until now in large outline. There have been clear escalations on different fronts. Red lines have been crossed, but somehow red lines have also been shifted. And so what we thought was a red line yesterday, today may no longer be a red line. What we have not seen is an all-out military confrontation by the principal actors in this conflict, except for once. So Israel and Iran. Of course, in April, we saw direct attack by Iran on Israeli soil in response to the killing of the Iranian commanders in the Iranian consulate in Damascus. The United States, while a strong military supporter of Israel, has not directly entered the fray either. And the question then that you put is, what is Israel's strategy? And that is entirely unclear. And I think if you listen to the Israeli leadership, if you listen to people in the security establishment, you see that there is quite a bit of confusion. Certainly when it comes to an exit strategy for the Gaza war, but also about what next, because Israel is now in a situation where not only has the Palestine question, which it had thought to have resolved, if you remember the speech that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave at the UN General Assembly September of last year, has exploded back into their faces. And not only that, but the direct threat to Israel from others in the region has only increased over the years and decades. So whereas Israel was a weak state, which had just won the war in 1948 when the state was created, that situation hasn't improved at all. It's gotten worse. After 75 odd years, the Palestinian issue is as powerful as it ever was. And so how can you have even an exit strategy that is relying solely on military force? It can't work. And so that is what they are grappling with, because now they feel under threat from Hezbollah and Lebanon. What to do? To go out for an all-out invasion, destroy Lebanon, but maybe not Hezbollah in the end, and suffer huge damage and casualties on the Israeli side as well. Or go for a limited invasion and a ground invasion and hope that somehow it can remain limited. Or to kill Hezbollah leaders, as they just tried to do, or maybe did, in the last 24 hours in Beirut. Does that make a difference? It will not deter Hezbollah, it will not deter Iran either when you kill Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. To the contrary, it can only escalate the situation. And so what really needs to happen for a serious exit strategy is an overall diplomatic approach. But we are very far from that, it seems.
Taghreed, as you mentioned earlier, the October 7 attack was orchestrated by Hamas's military wing, the Qassam Brigades, and not its political wing, which Haniyeh is the head of. So how did he then become a target for an assassination? And how much of this attack is about Haniyeh and how much of it is about where he was rather than who he was?
I do think it's the place. Haniyeh being in Iran, it's really like a big blow for Hamas. It's also a big blow for Iran. It's a strike against Iranian security. Like now, many, like how come this happened? They will investigate, definitely. But also it's a big blow, definitely. For Haniyeh to be there is why Israel chose the place. For Israel, they need targets. They need to continue the status quo of killing more Palestinians, more Hamas. This time it's Haniyeh, and he was in Iran. So the place is extremely crucial here. What we are witnessing is a mutual escalation. But the thing is, October 7, it's not Haniyeh at all. Haniyeh didn't know. And many will say, had Haniyeh known about it, it would never, succeeded. Definitely it's Sinwar. Deif alone, they really planned, and it is a line within Qassam that orchestrated the whole thing without consultation. And of course, Iran didn't know. Haniyeh, someone like Haniyeh didn't know. But for Israel, for this government, the more you kill, the better for them. That's how they read it. If you go back to Haniyeh's history, he is the first defenders of Hamas entering the political arena. Hamas wanted to maintain being the resistance project within the Palestinian cause. And there were many within Qassam who were very against getting into the political arena. But Haniyeh is the guy who really believed it. And remember, he was the prime minister for many, many years. He is the one who is very close to the man in the street. And he is loved. He is loved by many within Qassam, the young people within Qassam, definitely. It's so unfortunate that this has happened because, you need at the end of the day a person to talk to when it comes to Hamas. And he is also very he is the one who talks to countries like Egypt, Iran, Turkey, Qatar, and you name it, even Saudi Arabia. So, and now Haniyeh is out, but there will be someone definitely soon appointed to replace him. Is it the end of Hamas? No, surely Israel knows that, but I think they are aiming for more escalation.
Do we know who's going to succeed him?
It could be Mishal, it could be Hayya. There are names, and they are also powerful names. So that's why it's not like the end of the day for Hamas movement. The thing is, Haniyeh is very special for many people in Gaza because he is from Gaza. He's from Shati camp. And you need at this time someone from Gaza giving the genocide that Gaza has suffered. So now there will be a discussion. Now, surely it's taking place now within Hamas, and I'm sure they planned it. These people, they know they will be killed anytime. So it's not like a surprise that Haniyeh is dead now. They know this is coming, and Israel can do it anytime, anywhere.
And let's remember, Haniyeh's own family was killed in Israeli strikes in Gaza in April. And despite their killing, Haniyeh had insisted back then that all of this would not affect ceasefire talks. He was one of the main negotiators in the talks, and now he himself has been killed. So I'm going to ask you a question that the Qatari foreign minister asked. How can mediation succeed when one party assassinates the negotiator on the other side?
It won't succeed. It's very complicated now. It's not the time for it, definitely. If you have, look at Israel, what it's doing now. It hasn't even respected Biden's speech, like Biden's declaration of the ceasefire. Like, this is the intention of Bibi Netanyahu. He's not interested. There is the American elections, and definitely he's very interested for Trump to succeed, and he will do everything for Trump. And listen, now Trump will praise this attack. Why didn't it take place earlier? I'm sure that will be his reaction to this assassination.
It was not a great first day for the Iranian president, but really though, how does something like this happen during a highly coordinated visit by a Hamas leader in the capital of Iran, in a house, with security detail and presumably all precautions being taken against the possibility of this exact thing happening?
So I'm not entirely clear yet as to how the attack was carried out. So I have to be a little bit careful in what I say. But it's not the first time that Israel has successfully carried out assassinations in Iran. Iranian nuclear scientists and others in particular have been targeted successfully in the past. Any additional security for Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran is irrelevant if it's an airstrike, for example, an indirect hit on the place where he's staying. What stands out about this attack is not so much the security, because no person in the end is fully secure, especially when he's staying in a place that was already known. It was the Hamas guest house. In the end, Israel had the intelligence and had the technology to carry it off. And so it acted on the opportunity. And the fact that it happened on the inauguration of President Pezeshkian is just what makes the attack even more embarrassing to the Iranian leadership. But it's not like it's the first time.
Joost, Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei has already vowed to, quote, punish Israel for Haniyeh's assassination. In recent months, we've seen a lot of firsts. including from Iran when it launched cruise missiles into Israel in retaliation for Israel's attack on an Iranian diplomatic building in Damascus. Are these likely to just be heated words by Khamenei, or should we brace ourselves for a potentially even bigger Iranian response?
You're offering the two extremes, and I think the answer is probably somewhere in between. In other words, no, these are not empty words, and no, not necessarily will there be an attack of the magnitude as we saw on April 13th. The Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, has not indicated what he meant exactly, what form any retaliation would take. And there are many, many options. So there's a whole range of options. And keep in mind that the attack on the Iranian diplomatic facility in Damascus killed senior Iranian commanders. In the Iranian calculation, a senior member of the Iranian leadership or command structure is not necessarily the same as the Palestinian leader of Hamas. Of course, he's important and he was a guest and therefore under Iranian protection. At the same time, he's not Iranian. At the same time, he's not Yahya Sinwar, who is actually pulling the strings in Hamas when it comes to the situation in Gaza for sure. So, and I don't want to say Haniyeh is disposable because that is not true, of course, and would be quite harsh, but he's just not at the same level. So it doesn't suggest necessarily, but I can be proven wrong, that Iran will carry out an attack of the same scope and scale as it did last April 13th.
Joost, let's go back to Lebanon. Airlines had started to cancel their flights there, and the foreign minister said he was told by international officials that Israel's retaliatory strikes won't be on strategic targets like the Beirut or Rafiq al-Hariri airports. So there has been some anticipation there. But the attack on a crowded South Beirut suburb did come as a surprise for people there. How much of this attack by Israel was expected?
Well, I think if Hezbollah had expected this strike, then Fouad Shukr would have done more to conceal his presence and his movements. So I think Hezbollah was not expecting a surgical strike on a neighborhood, Harat al-Haik in Beirut. But again, this is not the first time that Israel has attacked people in Beirut. Remember Saleh al-Arouri in January. It all depends on the timing and the seniority. And I think in this case, the seniority does come into play on the Hezbollah side. But that is what determines the response in the end. Of course, Israel is going to do something that comes as a surprise. I mean, that's what militaries do, right, in fighting. That's what Hamas did on October 7th. In that sense, you should expect anything, anytime. But you try to also see how the other side calculates that what it does not trigger something much bigger and uncontrollable. And I think if you read the Israeli media today, you will see discussions about exactly this, that the security cabinet that Benjamin Netanyahu presides over as prime minister was trying to figure out a response to the Golan attack that would be strong enough to send a powerful message to Hezbollah, but not so strong that it would force Hezbollah to go all out in its response. So now, I don't know if that calculation is going to be the right one, because we need to wait and see what Hezbollah does. But we also know that until now, until this moment, there doesn't seem to be any desire on the part of Hezbollah or Iran or any of Iran's other allies to resort to an all-out war with Israel that would almost by definition bring the United States into it.
I want to ask you both a question. On multiple occasions since the war in Gaza began, Israel has been urged to practice restraint by the international community. Has this attack in Lebanon crossed the parameters of restraint? And will this set a precedent for just how much Israel can get away with in terms of attacks inside Lebanon and across the region? Basically, are the international rules of warfare even relevant at this point?
These are all subjective terms, right? I mean, the rules of war, that's objective in the sense that they are written down and universally embraced, but they're also open to interpretation. And when you say that the United States called on Israel to exercise restraint, That's an entirely subjective term. It can be interpreted in any which way you want. So the Hezbollah commander, Fouad Shukr, in Beirut is a military target. So there is no violation of the laws of war in targeting him. But there's other questions that come into play. What kind of other casualties were there? Of course, civilians were killed. So then the question of proportionality comes up. But in the end, what is more important than that, because unfortunately so few now care about any law, is the politics of it. So when you say restraint, Israel will try to do what it thinks it can get away with. And so will Iran, and so will Hezbollah. And this is why the situation is so volatile and so dangerous, because in the end, they're making calculations based on their perception of what the other side will do in response. And in the end, nobody knows.
Giving what ICC and ICJ came out with, and then the reaction of Israel and the support of the US. Again, like the US is coming out with this image of Israel, that Israel is above the law, despite their condemnation, their criticism, but they haven't put the pressure to stop Israel. And that is what many young people, the young generation all over, like they can see that. If you talk about October 7, the only positive outcome of it, which is so sad, it took October 7 for a revival of the Palestinian cause among the young generation all over. But it also shows that Israel is above the law, and thanks to who? To the superpower that is always promoting democracy, whatever. And it's really very ironic. It's very ironic, but I think we should look at the whole thing, not only what's happening in Lebanon or whatever. As I said, mutual escalation is happening. Escalation factors are increasing. They're present. What does it lead to? More escalation and more escalation. And who is benefiting? It's not good for Israel, for the future of Israel. It's not good. It's not good for the Palestinians, and giving the absence of any diplomatic solution or imposing the political solution, it doesn't lead to anything, and there will be anger and there will be revenge, and that's why it's extremely dangerous situation that we are living.
That's it from Beyond the Headlines. For more on this developing story, head to thenationalnews.com. This episode was produced by Ben Barqawi and Arthur Edison. Yasmin Al-Taji is the assistant producer, and Dua Farid is our editor. And I'm your host, Nada AlTaher.